for authors, filmmakers, entertainment, and all your listening needs. Listen now to Talk Now Radio, where no topic is taboo.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talk Now Radio. This is your host, Royce the Redneck Radio Man. And joining me tonight is G. Edward Griffin, and we're going to be talking about his book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, which is going to go into some detail about what he has learned about the Federal Reserve, the way it got started, the way it does business, the effect it has on the American public. And to be honest, I doubt we're going to have time to go through the whole thing tonight, but we're going to see how much of this that we can cover. So, and also, folks, I want to apologize for last night. My server was down. It was my fault. I accidentally clicked something I shouldn't have. But as you can see, I'm back up and running today. So, Ed, how are you doing tonight?
Oh, I'm doing well, Royce. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good. A little bit touched by the weather. I guess you can probably hear the hoarseness in my voice. That's all the moisture we get here in Texas.
Oh, moisture. I've heard about Texas moisture, yes.
Gets really humid. So, why don't you tell everybody real quick a little something about yourself and exactly what it was that got you interested in doing all this research and writing about the Federal Reserve?
Well, okay, Royce, that's probably the least important and probably the least interesting part of this whole story is my involvement. But anyway, it's a good question. It's like so many things that we do in our lives that wind up taking over a large portion of our lives. We don't really know how it got started. You know, it's some little thing that led to a bigger thing, and first thing you know, we're traveling down a path, and we don't remember how it got started. And in this case, that's pretty much true. I do remember parts of it. Some years ago, I was involved with producing some very low-budget documentary films. I was bootstrapping all those myself, and I decided I wanted to produce a documentary on inflation. And I didn't really know much about it, except I knew that there were some arcane secrets, that it wasn't really what most people thought. I knew that somehow the government was involved with it, but I wasn't quite clear. So I thought, well, hey, this would be an interesting topic. So I started to do some research, and I gathered a couple of cardboard boxes full of books and papers and made some phone calls and all that sort of thing that you do in the beginning. And then I got sidetracked. I never did produce the documentary, but I wound up with these boxes. So actually, it was a big box, one big box full of papers and files. And it wasn't until about 5 years later that I took a renewed interest in the topic. Somebody wanted to give them a talk before their group on taxes. I said, well, I don't know much about taxes except they're too high, and I'm against them. But I said I might be able to give your group an interesting presentation on a hidden tax. And they said, well, what is that? I said, well, a hidden tax called inflation. Oh, yeah, that'd be fine, they said. So that's what I did. I accepted the assignment, and I pulled my box out, and I went through all of this stuff, and I thought, wow, this is really interesting. I pushed it all back up into my frontal lobes and cobbled together a talk, and then that was well received. Some people came up to me afterwards and said, well, that's interesting. Why don't you put that show on the road? So I thought, well, that was encouraging, so I did. I offered it as one of my presentations if anybody wanted to retain me as a speaker, and sure enough, they started to call me, and I went on the road, and then I wound up putting a all-day seminar on the topic called a crash course on money. And then I decided, with the questions that people were asking me, that I really didn't know enough about the topic to offer myself as an expert. I'm sure I had a box full of papers. Well, what does that mean? And so I decided to quit that, and I went to school, literally. I signed up for what they call the College for Financial Planning. It's a Denver-based university that you do through correspondence, and you get your your professional planner's designation, you know, and just like somebody gets a CPA. So anyway, I enrolled in that. That took me a couple of years. I never did plan to become a professional financial planner, but I thought I needed to know more about the real world of markets because people were asking me questions as though I really knew something, you know. So I went to school. I got my diploma, and then I started to work on the book. I realized I'm going to write this out and put it all on paper. And then 7 more years passed before I finished it. So you see, it was a long path, and I was learning every step of the way. I never intended to write this book when I started.
And you never had any idea how deep the rabbit hole went till you got a good-sized chunk of the way through it.
No, I never realized what high voltage was in that wire that I was about to grab hold of. I never dreamed.
Okay, well, we got a question in the chat room. He wants to know, how does the Federal Reserve affect a business human resource department?
The Business Human Resource Department. Let me think. I guess they were talking about what we used to call the personnel department, human resources. Well, the Federal Reserve, let's say, affects everything, including that. I don't know if it would affect that more than any other, but the Federal Reserve affects every aspect of every commercial enterprise and every private financial transaction because it determines the value of our money. It determines the value of our money by determining the quantity of it. And obviously, the more there is out there in relationship to goods and services, why the less valuable it becomes. If you double the money supply overnight and send it out and gave everybody twice the amount of money that they had the day before, the next day, everybody says, "Oh, I'm twice as rich as I was before," but they really wouldn't be because by noon, all the prices for everything would have doubled. And because, everybody's got more money and the supply of services and products didn't double, so the demand for these products and services increased and the supply didn't. And, the old law of supply and demand takes over. So therein lies the secret of inflation that we were talking about a moment ago. But the impact on the Human Resources Department, I suppose, is that people going to work would expect to receive more income for their work, because they know that as the inflation creeps through society, it costs them more to get to work, costs them more to put groceries on the table, it costs them more to send their kids to school, and so they want more for their labor. And so it affects everybody, but certainly it impacts people at the wallet level, and because of the inflation factor. I'm not sure that was what the person was looking for when he asked the question, but that's what came to mind.
Well, he says Professor Shiflett was not sure about that, and he thanks you.
Oh, okay.
He's I think, taking a college class in business.
I see. Oh, well, yes. Well, he's looking at it more from a technical side, and I guess that was the correct answer then, because it ripples into the economy in the form of the prices of everything, and labor is certainly got a price to it, and that's the wages. Wages are merely the cost of labor. It's a price tag for labor, like the price tag for a car.
Well, this here is one of those things that I think I knew for years subconsciously, but it never came forth to my conscious mind until you said it, just how invested the Federal Reserve is in every facet of everybody's life, right down to the guy that mows your yard.
Well, yes, everything we do involves an exchange of labor in one sense or another. It's all labor underneath it all, because somebody, either we or whoever gave us the money, our ancestors maybe bequeathed it to us, somebody had to work and earn something and create something of value. And let's say that let's get money out of the equation to simplify this. Suppose there's no money, and we just had to barter everything. If we wanted to eat, and we were a furniture manufacturer, we'd have to go to the market and say, well, here's what I made this last week. I got a chair and a nice table over there, but my family is hungry. I'd like a bushel of that wheat and the side of that pork and whatever it is, and we bartered everything. It's easy when you think of it that way to realize that labor is behind all of economic transactions, because we wouldn't have anything if somebody didn't do the labor to create it. That's even true of the minerals that we dig out of the earth, the iron and the copper, the things we use in industry. It's true of the food we grow, and even the food that grows free and in the fields, the fruit on the trees growing wild. Somebody has to go out and pick it. Somebody has to put it in a basket. Somebody has to transport it to market and deliver it to the end user.
Even the fish in the ocean.
Even the fish in the ocean. There's labor involved in all economic transactions, and that's really what we're talking about. So the labor is what we're talking about when it comes to money. Now, money is merely, if you look it up in the dictionary, it's defined as the medium of exchange. So if we get tired of bartering our chairs and tables for a bushel of wheat, and we've got, let's say, more wheat than we can use, and we want to put it into economic transaction quickly before it rots or whatever, we exchange it for something that we don't need right now, and thinking that we'll hang on to it for later. Maybe we'll swap that for something that we need. So when we start swapping the product of our labor for something that we don't really want right now, but we take it because it has a storehouse of value, and we think we can then later swap it for something we do want, all of a sudden we're talking about money. So money is merely whatever it is that we use as a medium of exchange, not the direct exchange between the items itself, but something we just hold on to for a little while for later exchange. Once we understand that that's what money is, then a lot of fuddle factors begin to get cleared up. So if you're in the business and you've been given the authority by the state, and all the people say, yes, it's a good idea. If you're given the authority to create that medium of exchange, whatever it is, whether it's pieces of paper or coins or credit cards or units in a computer or whatever it is, if you have a monopoly on the ability to create that medium of exchange, how rich would you be, Now we're talking about the Federal Reserve System and all the other central banks of the world. It's not as simple as that, but that's the basic principle. They do create the money, which means they're given the power to create the medium of exchange. And indirectly, that means they can have an unlimited source for themselves, and they can use it to influence others. They can buy influence in organizations. They can buy up politicians. They can buy up ministers of the gospel. They can buy up leaders. They can buy up anybody that's got a need for money. They'll sell their services. And if you've got that power of money, before long, you're in control of the whole society. This is the story of
you choked their economy and you got them.
You've got them by the neck, yeah.
Well, let me ask you this. Is there any truth in it that you know of that the same people that are backing the Federal Reserve is also backing similar reserve systems in several different countries around the world?
Well, I wouldn't say it was the same people, but the same category of people. I mean, we're talking about bankers. But when we're talking at this global level, it's a little misleading to refer to them simply as bankers. Sometimes people refer to them as international bankers as an attempt to separate them from the typical guy that's sitting behind a desk down at the Bank of America, at the end of your block. Those are bankers too, but no, we're talking about a whole different kind of international bankers, or international financiers is probably a better word. These are the people who literally control the machines that make the money and make the credit available. They determine which corporations have a good credit standing, which ones can borrow billions of dollars at a very attractive interest rate, which ones are shut out. I mean, if they have an opponent, somebody who is considered as a competitor, and you control the flow of credit, you can squeeze them out of the market by denying them access to credit. Things like that come to play too. So it's not just their ability to be bankers, but their ability to control the success or failure of business enterprises. And so these so-called bankers, I call them the monetary scientists, they sit on the boards of directors of the largest corporations in the world. They sit in the Senates and Congress, the parliaments of all the governments of the world, and they are really able to use that leverage of money, the power of money that they have, to run just about everything. And nobody realizes it because, they're not in the news, most of them.
And their goal, of course, I would imagine, would be to keep everybody in debt. That way they don't lose their position of control and the upper hand.
Oh, well, of course, it's not only control, but just think of that. See, that's where they make their money. You see, a bank doesn't make any money at all. Well, not true. They could make a little bit of chump change if they were just getting a fee for cashing your checks and clearing exchanges between private bank accounts. They could make a little bit of change with that, but that's nothing. I mean, that's like a drop in the ocean. Where they really make their money is on interest on loans. And so, obviously, they like you to borrow money. And even though they look at you very sternly and say, well, we've got to look at your credit rating and we've got to make sure you're worthy of this loan and so forth. They're just salivating for you to come in and get a loan. And sometimes the worst candidate for a loan is the one they want the most. That would be some corporation that's practically bankrupt, or some third world country that has no means in the world of paying back their loan. They'll gladly lend billions of dollars to those countries. Why? Because they know the governments will bail them out.
Are you still with me? Uh-oh. Can you still hear me, Firehorse? Type in the chat room if you can. Oh boy, I think I lost Ed. Well, he shows to be on still. And my show shows to be on still. What happened?
In every country, but they all are in the same category.
Ed, I don't know what happened, but for a while there, I couldn't hear you, and all I could hear was what sounded like a fax machine.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, weird.
I don't know what to do about that.
I don't either. I never saw that happen before, but I don't know what happened, but it seems to be okay now. Maybe somebody was trying to block us out for some reason.
Oh, I don't know. I do have a fax machine on this line, which I just turned off, but I've never had, never a connection came through while I was on the phone. So who knows? I don't know.
Who knows? Well, getting back to the show, because I know we're getting shorter time, and I know you got other things you need to do. What would you say are some of the biggest things that we should have to worry about or look out for where this system is concerned?
Well, some of the biggest things.
Might have been asking a big mouthful on that one.
Well, that's a good one. I mean, I can think of hundreds of the biggest things. It's like asking somebody, "What's your favorite song?" Well, my favorite song is, and then I'll tell you. And they say, "But I thought yesterday you said your favorite song was something else." Well, yesterday it was. But yeah, one of the biggest problems to look out for, I suppose, is the fact. All right, one just popped into mind. Is the fact that the people of the world, the average citizens of the world, the folks who maybe are listening, many of them listening to this program, really believe that their political leaders are reliable, that they're trustworthy, that they're honest, and that they really want to do what is right for the country and right for them. And that they're just making mistakes, but they can't quite get it right, but they're trying really hard. I think that's the biggest problem right now, because people do not realize that, now this is not true in every case, but in general, we have created a worldwide concept of government. Worldwide, every country in the world has accepted the idea that government is supposed to be strong enough and powerful enough to solve all of our problems. And if we have a problem, the solution is to give government more power. That'll fix it, we think. And so every year, every day of every year, in all of the governments of the world, these political leaders are busy passing new laws, and more new laws, every one of which expands the power of the government. And the people accept it as good, they think, because they think that these politicians are going to solve the problems that afflict society. Therefore, what happens is at the end of this process, and I think we're approaching the end of this process, government keeps growing bigger and bigger and bigger until finally it gets to the point where it's total. It has total control over the economy and over our lives, supposedly to protect us, but in the end it controls us. And by doing this thing, the problems are not solved. Problems continue to get worse and worse because the problems were solved, most of them were solved by this process in the first place. So that is the basic problem. I'm afraid that if people don't break this ignorance pattern, they're going to just make matters worse and worse until finally we've come to the point where government is total. That means it's totalitarian, and we are nothing but slaves in the system.
Now, couldn't that sort of thing lead to a revolt?
In no way could it lead to a revolt, because at that point, the governments will have all of the weapons. They will disarm all of their citizens. The only thing the citizens could revolt against, or using, I should say, would be probably pitchforks would be outlawed. They'd have not even spoons. They might have spoons, but no, nothing but plastic forks and knives. There's no way that a disarmed population, and that's part of what's going on, could revolt against these leaders, which have mega weapons, I mean atomic weapons, chemical weapons, electronic weapons, weapons of such power that most people haven't even dreamed about them. No, a revolt is not going to happen that way, but it could happen. It could happen through the parliamentary process if people quit voting for the totalitarians and got off of their couches and decided to run for office themselves and enlist the support of their fellow citizens and say, let's change this system, not through a revolt on the streets or revolution in the streets, but a revolt of the heart and the mind and the thinking process. Then I think we have a possibility.
So forget about voting for a Republican or Democratic, either one, and start out with your own party.
Forget the party. That's the problem. You see, the founding fathers of this country spoke against the concept of a political party because they knew that once a party was formed, people would start paying allegiance to the party instead of the principle. Why don't we get that message straight, that party is part of the problem? It's not an issue of another party. What's to stop the new party from doing exactly what happened to the old party? People have to take charge of themselves and not say, well, what party do you belong to? No, ask them, what do you believe in? What are your principles? What should we be doing? Don't tell me what group you belong to, but tell me what you think.
Okay, so does that mean that maybe when the founding fathers first founded the country, there was no Republic or no Democratic at the time? There was no parties at all at the time?
Exactly true, yes.
Oh, wow, I didn't...
Yeah, they spoke against the danger. Well, a party grew up almost immediately, but at the beginning they had none, and the original founding fathers warned against it. But it happened anyway. And let's face it, it's a natural thing. You know, you find somebody of like mind, and so you form together, and you say there's power in numbers, let's get unified. And the first thing you know, you didn't intend to form a party, but you did. You formed a group, and then you have to give that group a name, and then you have to have a leader, and then the first thing you know, you've got the same thing as a party. So you have to, you know, be aware of that and guard against it. There's nothing wrong with a party if the party had really firm, immutable principles. If they stated up front, we believe this. This is our principle. I'm not talking about a party platform that says we're against this or we're against higher taxes or we're against the war in the Middle East. Those are issues. I'm talking about principles. I'm talking about principles such as we believe that the proper function of the government is to protect and not to provide, for example. We believe that the only justification for the use of coercion, which is the power of the state, that's what the government is all about, coercion, the only justification for using force against other human beings is to protect their lives, liberty, and property. Nothing more. That's a principle, you know? We believe that the rights, human rights, come with the human being. They're not granted to us by the state. We do not expect the state to give us our rights or tell us what our rights are. We tell the state what our rights are. That's a principle. When political parties start to adopt principles like that, then I'm all for them. But so far, that's not their goal. What a political party stands for today, you can be sure 5 years from now it'll be totally different, because there is no anchor. It's just a question of, well, what can we say to win votes? What do we think the people want to hear? And we'll just go mouth those platitudes and those slogans, and we'll get elected. That's what it's all about.
Of course, when they get elected, it's because they think they know more how everything should run than anybody else knows. And in all actuality, half the time they get bought off anyway.
They get bought off anyway, yeah. And they were probably bought off before they went there, or they went there because they wanted to be bought off. A lot of these people, you see, they go there because they know once they get there, the price of buying them off gets higher. They make more money there. Let's face it, when you create a huge government like this, with all that power becomes a magnet to all of the criminal class. All of the predators, they think, wow, if I got elected, if I got appointed to a government position, I could do things and get paid for it that otherwise they put me in jail for.
Well, it is all over Facebook that exact thing is happening now.
Yeah.
I mean, people post it from news articles, but pretty much about how the rich are getting tax cuts while the middle class is getting overtaxed, and they're cutting food stamps on the poor, while some of the people that are in government have actually been on food stamps while they were making a six-figure income.
Well, yeah, but if we had a principle, what is the principle that? Why should anybody be on food stamps that people are required to pay for? Why should you or I? Why should you be forced at the point of a gun and a bayonet to pay for my food, even if I'm hungry? Now, I think your conscience should cause you to be charitable, and we know that historically, when the government wasn't involved in the charity business, people were very charitable. We had less poverty, less hunger, less suffering in those days than we have now, when governments are astride of these giant welfare programs, supposedly to take care of the poor, but they're raking it off at the top. It's all a big scam, and they just pretend that it's all about the poor, when in reality it's all about creating some huge giant bureaucracy and an agency and getting a budget and hiring more people and all that stuff. It's all an excuse. But in reality, it all happens because we think that government should feed the hungry. Where in the Constitution do you see that? What principle of government is it that says that I or you are required to pay for somebody's health care, or for their housing, or their food, or their shelter, or their education, or their mortgage, or their clothing? Where? What principle is that? See, that's what starts the whole thing. Once we think that government is supposed to do that, well, then it's a slippery slope all the way down until government does not only that, but it does everything, and that's totalitarianism, in the name of helping the people.
Which explains why everything starts out innocent and helpful and, like a lamb, and then turns into a wolf by the time it's through.
That's right, yeah. Well, there was a very important organization, it's still there in England, called the Fabian Society.
I heard of them.
Yeah, well, they're very important. You don't read about it much in the press. They're still there. When I was in England a few years ago, I looked them up. Sure enough, their office is right there. And it was a Sunday, so it was closed. I couldn't go in. I said, by golly, they even got their sign out there. Took a picture of it and all that. Fabian Society, very important group. A lot of very powerful politicians in England are members. And the reason I mention it is because in the beginning they had a headquarters, which was I've forgotten the name of them. Anyway, there was a headquarters. The house was donated by one of the prominent members. And in that headquarters, they had a stained glass window. And in the window, they had a lot of symbolism about their organization. And one of them was a wolf in sheep's clothing. And they boasted about it. They said, we are wolves in sheep's clothing. And they had this right there in the stained glass window. And you can learn a lot by studying the works of your opponents.
Yeah, I believe that. That is, it makes a lot of sense. Now, I know you said, or actually Jones said you had about 30 minutes to devote tonight, and it's been about that already. I don't want to rush you, but I don't want to hold you if you've got things to do either. So real quick, do you think you can tell us a little something about Freedom Force International, and I think you got another website as well, and what you're doing with them.
Yeah, thanks for that. I appreciate that, Royce. In fact, that's the reason I can't stay on much longer, is I have some deadlines to meet for our weekly newsletter called Unfiltered News. And I'll start off by inviting anybody that is interested in our input, our take on what's going on in the world today, to sign up for it. It's a free subscription. You can just look it up on the internet. It's Unfiltered News, and you'll get right to it. And it's produced by me personally. I'll probably be up all night tonight cobbling it together. It gets published tomorrow. And what we try and do with that, Royce, is we gather the news from all around the world as best we can. We have a lot of input that people help us with. We got one very sharp gal on the staff that just scours news sources all around the world. And we look for stories that are significant in two areas. One is, of course, the area of freedom issues and things we're talking about. And the other secondary strong issue, on my part at least, is health issues, natural health. I mean, how to remain healthy in this toxic world, and how to do the best you can without getting hooked on artificial drugs, things that come out of the test tube, things like that. And so our stories are primarily focused on those two categories. So if you're interested in that, I urge you to sign up and just look it up. It's Unfiltered News, and I think you'll like it. Now, that's one thing. We have a commercial site, which is called Reality Zone, and you can find that with realityzone.com. And that's where we sell books and recordings, DVDs and CDs, and a lot of books. We have about 100 different items relating to some of the themes that we've been talking about today. And finally, the third site is very close to my heart. That's more or less a think tank. That's where we deal with the problem of what to do about this mess. You know, you can talk about the problems till you're blue in the face. And then the question is, well, what are you going to do about it? Is there anything you can do about it? And if there is, well, let's get started. And that's called Freedom Force. The full name is freedomforceinternational.org. It's an organization. And we have nothing to sell there. We have plenty of ideas, plenty of strategies, and anybody that wants to become part of the solution, instead of just talking about the problem, that's the place for you.
Now, is there a membership fee to that, or?
Well, yeah, we have different levels of membership. For those that can't afford anything, and there are people like that, we have a free membership. But most of our people come in and they send us some dues. They more or less set their own dues, and then of course some people support us very significantly. We're very grateful for that, because if it weren't for them, we wouldn't be in existence. But it's not a question of money. It's a question really of what you do.
Right.
You know, we've got to get out of our homes, away from our TV sets, and out into the real world where people are, and we have to make our influence felt as leaders.
So this is sort of a grassroots movement, maybe?
Yeah, I was going to say yes without hesitation, but I'm thinking of I'm trying to get creative here for a moment. It's not grassroots. It's more like tree branches. We're a little bit higher than that. And I don't mean to sound elite or anything like that, but the truth is that all of society has always moved. Throughout history, it's always been moved by about 1 to 3% of the population. Now, you need a grassroots movement, that's true. But the real leadership of that grassroots movement is always from 1 to 3% of the population. Those are the folks we're looking for, the ones who will, do more than average. The question sometimes comes up, what can the average person do? And my answer is to become unaverage.
They could do things like perhaps write books, speak to the public, run for office, or anything, stuff like that, perhaps?
Anything else, anything that's not average. The average is to sit in front of the television set and say, boy, things are really bad, aren't they? Now, that's average. Now, if that's average, this is not the solution. And if the average is, well, who are you going to vote for, Republican or Democrat? That's average. That's not the solution.
We've been doing that for years, and look where we're at now.
Yeah, it's exactly true, yeah.
So, All right. Well, listen, I've been really enjoying talking to you, and I hate to let you go like this, but I know you got a deadline to meet, and I was kind of hoping that maybe sometime further down the road we can meet up and talk again somewhere and maybe see where you're at the time and what's going on.
Okay, Royce. Well, I urge you to personally come into Freedom Force. You're a person of some influence. You're on the radio. I know you have a lot of followers and supporters. You're doing, right now, whether you know it or not, you're doing the mission of Freedom Force.
Well, I am aware of that. I don't just approach it from the revenue or the government. I also am involved in religion and spirituality, because those are some of the forces I think that's behind the whole thing to begin with.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
So with that, I'm going to say goodnight, and I'm going to look into coming in over there as soon as I can. I got some catching up I got to do from the last time I was in the hospital, so it may be next week.
Okay, very good. Well, be sure to get on our mailing list if you're not there already.
Okay, and I'll make sure I send links to you for the show in the archive.
Okay, thanks a lot, Royce.
All right, thank you.
All right. You bet. Goodbye.